Hey guys, it's Sandro here, and welcome to part 2 of the detail on this 2020 Subaru WRX STI. In part 1, I took you guys through the wash, decontamination and preparation steps to get to this stage, and now I'm going to start this video off by jumping straight into the paint correction process by doing some test sections on the bonnet to see which polish, pad, machine and technique is going to work best to eliminate the minor defects and amplify gloss and clarity to the paint in the least aggressive manner. So my starting point was using the U.S.A white finishing system with their ultra fine polishing pad and their Uno Pure finishing compound on my EX62015 ShineMate polisher. I'm starting on quite a low machine speed, applying minimal product to the pad, just using light to moderate pressure and a slow to moderate arm speed, doing 3 relatively quick passes. So in essence, this is a very mild combination used with a very mild technique, which is a great starting point as the defects really aren't all that bad, and being a Subaru, it's most likely going to be a soft paint. Additionally, we saw in part 1 just how little clear coat this new car has, which is just appalling in my opinion. So I'm really going to try and find a combination and technique that maintains as much clear coat as possible, and I'd be surprised if this combination removes more than a micron of paint. Now having a look at the results, I can see an improvement where perhaps 30 to 40% of the existing swirls have been removed. But I'm struggling to see any sort of difference in relation to improved gloss and clarity levels. So unfortunately, even on this most likely soft paint with quite mild defects, this combination just hasn't got enough bite to give me any sort of an acceptable outcome, let alone the high-end result that I'm looking for. For a second test, I stuck with the same white foam pad as it seemed to finish really well, but stepped up to my U.S.A fine DA compound to hopefully give this pad a bit more correction ability. I also ever so slightly increased my machine speed and pressure to also adjust my technique to give this second combination a little bump in aggression. Now looking at the results in this second test section, it's definitely better than the first section, and I'd say I was able to remove about 50% plus of the defects, and even the clarity of the finish looks a touch better. So all in all, I was moving in the right direction with a much better result, but it was still a far cry from the 95% plus defect removal I was chasing, and although the gloss and clarity was good, I knew it could still be better. For a third test section, I moved to the U.S.A yellow correction system using both the yellow fine foam pad and the yellow fine DA compound. I also once again just ever so slightly increased my machine speed and started using a little more pressure and a slightly slower arm speed to give this combination the best chance to increase cut while still maintaining a good finish. This was by far the best outcome so far, I'd say achieving about 80% defect removal. And although the gloss and clarity was also the best so far, there was still a hint of haze in the finish, meaning that it still could be better. Now at this point, my next option would be to move onto a slightly more aggressive medium cut compound, or perhaps a slightly more aggressive light cutting foam or wall pad to increase the defect removal and perhaps even get some better clarity that I know is possible on this paint. However, as you guys would have seen in part 1, the overall paint thickness was about 80 to 90 microns, and the predicted clear coat was perhaps 30 microns or so, which is extremely low for a brand new car. Now from my position, there's no risk in me burning through the clear coat if I choose to start using even very coarse compounds and pads, because there's no way I'm going to remove 30 microns of clear unless I get stupidly aggressive for no reason. But my main concern is the longevity of this paint over the next couple of decades, and the only way it's going to survive is if it's always protected with some sort of wax sealant or coating, maintained with regular safe washing techniques, and if no one unnecessarily corrects the paint with too much aggression. So those three things have to happen in order to avoid clear coat failure if it's going to be a daily driver, which it is. So as you can see, my next test section was using an all-in-one primer polish in the form of Shine Supply Slickback. Now as you'll hopefully see, this was by far the best outcome so far, essentially eliminating 95% plus of the defects and producing the best visual improved levels of gloss and clarity. However, if I was being picky, and I'm paid to be picky, there was just the slightest hint of haze that I just couldn't seem to address or eliminate with Slickback on this softer paint. In the end, I actually did a few more test sections off camera with Slickback and a few other primer polishes, as I was pressed for time, to try and find the best combination and technique for this specific paint, which did end up being CarPro Essence on the Ruper's yellow foam pad, using just a little more speed of my polisher at about 4.5 with moderate pressure and a slowish arm speed, doing 3 passes in total, which seemed to work a treat to not only remove the defects, but also achieve quite fantastic gloss and clarity levels where the paint really started to come alive. Now being a one-step process without the need to pursue any heavy correction, I used my larger polisher for about 80% of the work on most panels, but for some of the edge work, body lines and intricate areas, I also used my mini 3-inch polisher to both get better and safer correction in those areas. The key to a successful paint correction process is firstly to do your testing to discover what products and equipment are going to give you the best results on that specific paint using your specific techniques and methods. And only you can work that out, as every paint and person is different. But secondly, and just as importantly, is being consistent with your method and technique as you progress around the car. So try to stick to working same size sections with the same technique from the first to last section, and make sure you're blowing or brushing out your pads and switching to clean ones as needed, or else your results will suffer and get worse by the end. As mentioned in part 1, I really love this blue Subaru paint, as it's just so rewarding to work on, and as you guys will hopefully see in part 3, once it's not only corrected but also coated and protected, it just looks amazing when you get it right. Now, as I continue to correct the paint, I want to talk a little more about all-in-one primer polishes and why they are going to become more important as car manufacturers continue to apply less and less paint to new cars. And as respectful and responsible detailers, we need to adjust to that. Firstly, for those of you that may be a little unsure, an all-in-one polish is basically a standard car polish that includes a wax or sealant in its formula so that it both corrects and protects the paint in one step, and additionally has some masking or filling abilities as all waxes and sealants do to improve the finish of the paint, address minor compounding haze, and improve gloss and clarity levels. A primer all-in-one polish generally refers to an SiO2 based all-in-one polish that will allow a ceramic or nano coating to effectively bond to it, as most standard or old school all-in-one polishes won't allow these coatings to properly bond or last over their finish. The benefits of a good all-in-one polish is that due to its ability to both remove and fill in defects, it can largely limit the need to not only use less aggressive compounds, but also do less correction steps. So it can both preserve clear coat and save time. And with so little clear coat now being applied to new cars, all-in-one polishes have never been more important than they are today. The additional benefit you get from a primer all-in-one polish is that it's very accepting to not only ceramic coatings, but really any wax or sealant you choose to top it with. And since every all-in-one polish on the market today has quite poor durability and hydrophobic performance, it's extremely important to seal or top them with a more durable or higher performing form of paint protection. So then why aren't primer polishes used more? For one, they do have their limitations. When working on extremely bad or trashed paints and harder paints, it's quite difficult to achieve great defect removal with an all-in-one polish. As if that polish is made to be too aggressive, it simply won't finish very well, and there's really no point in having a two-step all-in-one polish, as you just use a standard polish if you had to do a multi-step correction. Now there are some all-in-one and primer polishes that do have more cut than others, but generally speaking, the better cut they have, the worse their finishing abilities, so there's always a trade-off. Secondly, there is a stigma that even I'm guilty of, in that I don't like using products that feel or mask in defects, as that's not true paint correction. But it's important to understand that no all-in-one polish can mask more than just some very fine haze or the absolute finest of swirls. So it's not like it's going to fill in any substantial swirls, scratches, or even other defects like edgings or significant oxidation. All-in-one polishes will still actually remove about 80 to 90% of the defects that are gone, and they'll only fill in about 10 to 20% of the more mild ones. The other important thing to note is that although I can't say I've got conclusive evidence, I can say that in all the testing I've done to date on side-by-side test panels, ceramic coatings do seem to last and perform just as well when placed over clean bare paint as they do when applied over a primer polish. So maybe it's just more of a hang up when it comes to primer polishes that I and other detailers need to get over, as there's definitely some benefits to be had. And when it comes to paints like this that simply don't have much clear to start with, these primer polishes may be the more responsible choice to go for. Now for the most part, this job was progressing fairly well, with no real hiccups or dramas. The defects were coming out relatively easy, and the finish was looking really fantastic from panel to panel. But I wanted to discuss here a few more cons and pros of using primer polishes compared to standard compounds, and maybe add some tips that can help some of you out. One great thing about all-in-one polishes is that there's no need to do an IPA or panel wipe. In fact, you want to avoid it, especially before the polish has had time to cure, or else you will be removing its sealant, fillers and priming agents, leading to a poorer looking finish and potentially bonding issues with your coating. But not having to do an IPA wipe saves time and money, which is great. Additionally, you can also use primer polishes like standard polishes to correct glass, gloss and clear plastics and even metal trims, so they are just as versatile. You'll also find that most all-in-one and primer polishes dust very little if at all, so they're also quite clean to work with. But it's not all peaches and cream, as they also have their cons. When working outdoors or in direct sunlight, primer polishes can be extremely difficult to wipe down, so they're generally not the best in those conditions, and more new school primer polishes tend to be worse than old school all-in-one polishes in that area. Secondly, you will find that both your polishing pads and microfiber cloths do get overloaded faster, so you will be going through more of them when using all-in-one polishes. Thirdly, SiO2 based primer polishes don't tend to respond well to high heat, so when working on substrates like glass, plastics and fiber based materials that don't conduct or disperse heat very well, you can get baked residue spots that are extremely difficult to wipe off, and you usually have to let the panel cool down and polish over them again to remove that baked on residue. Fourthly, primer polishes can sometimes leave a little haze in the finish when you initially wipe them down, so in some cases it may take up to an hour for the sealants in these polishes to self-level and remove that initial haze, and you will find that these polishes generally look a lot better a few hours after you've applied them. Now all these pros and cons will differ with each specific primer polish, as well as your environment, technique and the paint you're working on, but you can make your life easier by understanding these characteristics found in many primer all-in-one polishes and by adapting your techniques accordingly. I guess what I'd also say is that traditional car compounds have been around for over 100 years. All-in-one polishes popped up about 20 years ago, and these new SiO2 based primer polishes have only been around for about a decade. So they are still relatively new, and there's certainly more potential for them to get much better given more time and development. Well, that's about it for part 2 of this series and the paint correction stage. All up, I'd say it took about 10 to 12 hours, which I guess is still a fair amount of time and work for a single stage all in one process. But for me personally, that's about as quick as any correction process I do these days, and it's really the bare minimum of time I can spend during this stage and be happy I'm still producing a high-end result for my clients. Now this paint wasn't all that bad to start with, so this is really the time it would take to do a new car detail. But if this was an older vehicle with more serious defects, it would have taken at least 2 to 3 times longer. Something I'll leave you guys to think about is that although it's near impossible to measure the amount of clear coat I removed, if I had to take a guess, I'd say it was about a micron or 2. However, if I had to guess at how many microns my primer polish added back onto the paint, it would probably also be about a micron or 2. And lastly, if I had to estimate how much thickness my ceramic coating will additionally add to the paint in the end, it's probably going to be another 2 or 3 microns after it's laid down. So it's kind of crazy to think that I could potentially be handing this car back to the owner with more clear coat thickness than it came in with. Let me know if I just blew your mind. I hope you guys stay tuned for part 3 and the final chapter of this detail, where I'll be ceramic coating the paint and showing you guys the final finished results. As always, I really hope you guys enjoyed and found this video useful. Please share this video, like, comment and subscribe to this channel to show your support for this content, and I'll see you guys soon.